My daughter-in-law told me, if you don't like it, leave. While living rent-free in my home, if you can't stand living under our roof, then don't let the door hit you on the way out, Celeste declared, striking a pose in my heirloom kitchen as if she were the queen of the castle. Just moments later, she was practically shrieking for emergency services, insisting I was in the throes of some bizarre delusion. What she hadn't accounted for was the discreet audio recorder I'd activated the moment her entitled tone grated on my nerves. If you're seeing this, do subscribe and let me know your thoughts below. Allow me to recount how I found myself packing my daughter-in-law's designer luggage while she dialed 911 on her own phone. It all began about 6 months ago when my son, Liam, announced his tech startup had unexpectedly imploded. "Just for a little while, Mom," he'd promised, arriving at my doorstep with Celeste and their formidable collection of bags, "until I get back on my feet." I'm Eleanor Vance, 69 years young, and apparently still gullible enough to believe a little while meant anything less than a permanent fixture. My late husband, George, had left me this charming 4-bedroom colonial in Willow Creek when he passed 3 years prior, along with a perfectly adequate pension from my long career as a university librarian. What I disastrously overlooked was that I had just welcomed 2 polished, perfectly coiffed parasites into my sanctuary. "Mom, you're being utterly unreasonable," Liam had sighed last Tuesday when I tentatively suggested that 6 months might constitute a little while for a temporary arrangement. "Celeste and I contribute to this household." Contribute. The word almost choked me. They'd paid precisely 0 for rent, utilities, or even a single carton of milk since their grand arrival. Celeste, supposedly working part-time as an online boutique consultant, channeled most of her earnings into extravagant matcha lattes and impulse buys from luxury e-commerce sites. Liam's job search seemed to involve extensive research into the most comfortable napping positions on my sectional sofa, punctuated by raids on my gourmet pantry. "We occasionally load the dishwasher," Celeste piped up, her eyes glued to her phone, scrolling through Instagram photos of their recent getaway to Bali, a trip funded entirely by my secondary credit card, which they'd borrowed without so much as a text. "How incredibly charitable of you," I retorted, the sarcasm thick enough to cut with a knife. That's when Celeste finally looked up, her gaze as chilling as an Arctic wind. "Eleanor, if you find our presence so distasteful, you are perfectly free to relocate any time." The sheer audacity robbed me of breath. In my own home, my own kitchen, standing beside the professional-grade refrigerator I'd meticulously chosen and paid for, consuming food bought with my own pension. "Pardon me?" I managed, my voice a quiet tremor. "You heard me. Nobody is forcing you to endure our company if we're such an imposition." Liam shuffled his feet awkwardly, maintaining a cowardly silence. My own son, witnessing his wife attempt to evict his mother from her own abode. That was the moment something irrevocably shifted within me. The old Eleanor might have stammered an apology, perhaps even started packing her own meager overnight bag. But this, Eleanor had reached her absolute limit. "You know what, Celeste? You are absolutely positively right." I strode upstairs to the master guest suite they'd commandeered and pulled their largest suitcase from the closet. Celeste trailed behind me, no doubt expecting to see me meticulously folding my cardigans into it. Instead, I began to hurl her belongings inside. Her pristine yoga gear that had never witnessed a single sun salutation, the ostentatious jewelry she'd acquired with funds they patently lacked, the collection of designer clutches cluttering my antique dresser. "What in the world are you doing?" she shrieked. "Packing," I replied, my voice eerily calm, as I added Liam's extensive collection of vintage video game consoles to the growing heap. "Isn't this precisely what you wanted? Not our things. Your things?" I paused, holding up one of her ludicrously overpriced cashmere wraps. "Oh, darling, I'm not the one who needs to depart. This is my residence. My name adorns the deed." Her complexion cycled through an alarming spectrum, stark white, then furious crimson, finally a mottled purple. She snatched up her phone and began to frantically tap. "Yes, I require both police and medical assistance," she stammered, her voice abruptly fragile and tearful. "My mother-in-law is experiencing some sort of mental collapse. She's acting completely unhinged, and I'm genuinely terrified for everyone's safety." Mother-in-law. Since when had I been family in her lexicon? She's threatening us and throwing our possessions around. I believe she might be having a psychotic episode. I continued packing, marveling at the profound sense of serenity that enveloped me. Let her dial whomever she pleased. This house remained unequivocally mine. What I didn't yet realize was that, barely a quarter hour after Celeste's theatrical distress call, the chime of my doorbell echoed through the house. Through the frosted glass, I discerned 2 uniforms from the local precinct and a young paramedic on my porch, their expressions a blend of official caution and mild confusion. Just beyond them, a sleek black sedan, its windows tinted, waited like a predator. "Mrs. Vance?" the senior officer inquired, his tone measured. "We received a rather urgent call about a domestic disturbance." I stepped aside, inviting them in with an open gesture. "Please do come in, though I must confess I'm quite unaware of any disturbance that merits this kind of attention." Just then, Celeste materialized at the top of the grand staircase, her face a canvas of manufactured agony, streaked with artfully applied tears. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," she choked out, her voice quivering with what she hoped was convincing terror. She just started flinging our things around, screaming about how we don't belong here. I've never witnessed such an unpredictable outburst." The younger officer glanced between us, his brow furrowed. "Ma'am," he addressed me, "is this your primary residence?" "Indeed," I affirmed, my voice steady. "I've called this home for 41 years now." He then turned to Celeste. "And you, miss?" "I'm Celeste Vance," she announced, her voice regaining a touch of its usual self-importance. "Liam's wife. We've been staying here, diligently caring for Eleanor, ever since her husband George passed away." "Caring for me?" I barely stifled a laugh. The woman who routinely left the toilet unflushed, neglected to replace empty milk cartons, and considered ordering takeout a culinary skill, was supposedly my devoted caregiver. "Mrs. Vance," the senior officer interjected, his voice softening slightly, "your daughter-in-law states you were packing their belongings and told them to leave. Could you clarify what transpired?" "Certainly," I replied, maintaining a serene composure. Celeste herself informed me that if my current living arrangement with them was unsatisfactory, I was perfectly free to relocate any time. As this is unequivocally my property, the logical conclusion was that perhaps they might be the ones who should consider moving instead. I was merely assisting them in preparing for that eventuality. The paramedic, a fresh-faced recruit who looked barely out of his residency, stepped forward. "Mrs. Vance, I just need to ask a few standard questions to ensure you're feeling all right. Could you tell me the current date?" "It's Tuesday, October 15th, I stated precisely 2:30 in the afternoon. "And yes, I'm feeling perfectly sound. Thank you for your concern. Would you like to know the current exchange rate for the Japanese yen, or perhaps recite the chemical formula for photosynthesis?" He blinked, clearly thrown off script. "She seems entirely lucid," he muttered to the officers, a note of bewilderment in his voice. It was at that exact moment a tall, silver-haired man emerged from the black sedan, his impeccably tailored suit whispering, "Expensive private practice." "Officers, I'm Dr. Alistair Finch. I am a consulting psychiatrist, and Mrs. Vance has been a patient under my care." I stared at him, utterly dumbfounded. "I beg your pardon," I finally managed, "but I've never laid eyes on you in my life." Dr. Finch adopted that patronizing, overly gentle tone often reserved for difficult elderly patients. "Eleanor," he began, "you visited me last month, recall? We discussed your increasing memory lapses and the rather pronounced paranoid ideations you've been experiencing regarding your family." "That's utterly preposterous," I retorted, a spark of indignation igniting within me. "I have no memory issues, and I most certainly do not harbor paranoid ideations." Celeste began her slow, mournful descent down the stairs again, her manufactured tears flowing afresh. "Mom," she whimpered, "you don't remember. You've been so forgetful lately. Just last week you accused Liam and me of stealing your credit cards." "Because you did steal my credit cards." The words burst from me, sharper and louder than I'd intended, and I observed the officers exchange uneasy glances. Dr. Finch nodded sagely, as if validating his own diagnosis. "This type of aggressive denial is a classic indicator," he explained to the officers, frequently seen in individuals suffering from cognitive decline. They often lash out at family members, accusing them of theft or even conspiracy. I am not suffering from cognitive decline, I insisted. Mrs. Vance, the senior officer said carefully, would you object if we conducted a brief walkthrough just to verify everything is in order? Of course not, I replied, leading them through my immaculately kept home. I guided them past the living room where Celeste's tabloids and designer shopping bags were strewn across my antique coffee table, through the kitchen where their tower of unwashed dishes sat precariously in my sink, into my home office where Liam had effectively colonized my computer for his online poker tournaments, leaving crumbs and empty soda cans like an archaeological dig. In the master guest suite, which they had long since appropriated, their belongings were indeed scattered across the floor, exactly where I had been meticulously packing them. To an outside observer, lacking context, it undoubtedly appeared to be the chaotic aftermath of a mental unraveling. Dr. Finch surveyed the scene with an almost theatrical concern. Eleanor, can you explain why you were handling these items in such a manner? I was merely taking Jennifer's advice, I stated calmly, and helping them pack. She suggested that if I didn't like living with them, I was free to leave. Since this is my house, I concluded that they should be the ones departing, and I was simply facilitating their exit. But these are not your belongings to pack, dear, he said gently, as if reasoning with a small child. They are, however, in my house. They'd been ensconced for nearly 8 months now, without a single cent of contribution towards rent or upkeep. Celeste's theatrical sobs intensified, a crescendo designed for effect. Her narrative about my supposed financial instability had clearly been building for weeks. Just yesterday, she'd launched into a tirade about our supposed lack of household contribution, despite Liam and her routinely draining my bank account for their essentials. I longed to challenge her, to demand proof of their mythical grocery purchases, but the cold, calculating glint in Dr. Alistair Finch's eyes sent a shiver down my spine. It was a silent warning. Every word I uttered would be twisted, weaponized as proof of my mental decline. The calculated malice of it all struck me with chilling clarity. This elaborate charade was no sudden emergency. It was meticulously orchestrated. Mrs. Vance, we strongly recommend you accompany us to the hospital, Dr. Finch intoned, his voice oozing with a practiced saccharine empathy. It's merely for a brief observation, a few routine tests to ensure your well-being. The senior officer chimed in, his discomfort palpable. While we can't legally compel you, Dr. Finch has expressed significant concerns about your current mental state. I surveyed the tableau of my supposed demise. Celeste, now strategically dabbing at her eyes with a lace-trimmed handkerchief. Liam, a picture of impotent concern, lingering in the periphery. 2 uniformed officers radiating a desperate wish to be anywhere but my living room. The young paramedic conspicuously checking his wristwatch, and this self-proclaimed psychiatrist, a complete stranger boldly asserting he was my physician. All right, I declared, my voice surprisingly steady. I'll go to the hospital, but first I'm making a call to my attorney. Mom, there's no need for lawyers, Celeste interjected, her tone shifting to one of feigned alarm. We're family. We just want what's best for you to help you recover. Family. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. Remembering this family had squatted in my home for months, siphoning my resources, then told me I was free to leave. Ignoring her, I retrieved my phone and dialed Sarah Jenkins, the sharp-witted lawyer who had skillfully managed George's estate. She answered promptly. Sarah, it's Eleanor Vance. I need you at Willow Creek General, immediately. It seems I'm undergoing an unscheduled psychiatric evaluation. A stunned silence met my words. Eleanor? What on earth are you talking about? I'll explain everything when you arrive, I said, disconnecting before anyone could formulate an objection. Dr. Finch's composed expression flickered into a scowl. Mrs. Vance, bringing legal counsel into this at this juncture could needlessly complicate matters. Doctor, I countered, my voice maintaining a polite but firm edge. Considering I've never had the pleasure of meeting you until today, and you are decidedly not my physician, I believe securing legal representation is entirely appropriate. The younger officer, his confusion evident, piped up, Wait, if Mrs. Vance has never met you. How are you, her doctor?" Dr. Finch's carefully constructed veneer developed its first visible fracture. "Mrs. Vance is merely confused about our prior consultations." "Oh, and when precisely did these consultations occur?" I inquired, an innocent lilt in my tone. He stammered, "Patient confidentiality prevents me from—" "Right," I cut him off, a knowing smile playing on my lips. "So you can openly discuss my supposed memory lapses and paranoid delusions with law enforcement, but you can't disclose the dates of our supposed sessions?" Celeste rushed forward, her voice a desperate plea. "Mom, you don't recall because of your confusion. That's precisely why Dr. Finch is here to assist you." "Celeste," I stated, my gaze fixed on hers, "in 3 decades of marriage to your father-in-law, George, I never experienced a single memory lapse. I meticulously managed our finances, successfully oversaw a classroom of 30 energetic teenagers, and could recite every family birthday and anniversary without hesitation. Yet, mysteriously, in the mere 8 months since you and Liam graced my doorstep, I've apparently succumbed to a sudden, virulent onset of dementia." The senior officer's posture stiffened, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. "Dr. Finch," the senior officer interjected, his tone now decidedly less sympathetic, "do you possess any verifiable documentation of your prior treatment of Mrs. Vance?" "The relevant records are at my practice," he replied, his voice tightening. "Which practice?" I pressed, my smile unwavering. "What's the name of your clinic? And its precise location?" The facade finally fractured further, revealing the tension beneath. "I hardly believe this hostile interrogation is conducive to the patient's delicate mental state," Dr. Finch sputtered. "Hostile interrogation?" I chuckled, a genuine, mirthless sound. "Officer, I'm simply requesting a man who purports to be my doctor to furnish rudimentary details about his professional establishment. If that's considered hostile, then perhaps I am indeed losing my faculties." Celeste, now visibly unnerved, began to cast anxious glances between Dr. Finch and the increasingly watchful police officers. "Can't we just get her to the hospital?" she whined, her voice thin. "She obviously needs help." It was at that precise, opportune moment that Sarah Jenkins made her grand entrance. She swept through my front door like a legal Valkyrie, a formidable presence in a tailored charcoal suit, a sleek leather brief in one hand, her phone still pressed to her ear with the other. "Which one of you is Dr. Alistair Finch?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the manufactured tension without a preamble. The silver-haired psychiatrist visibly flinched, then stepped forward, regaining his composure. "I am. And you, madam?" "Sarah Jenkins," she announced, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the scene. "Mrs. Eleanor Vance's attorney, and I've just had a rather illuminating conversation with the State Medical Board regarding your sudden, undocumented treatment of my client. It seems there's a fascinating discrepancy concerning Dr. Alistair. Sarah Jenkins. His license was suspended 6 months ago for his involvement in fraudulent psychiatric holds." The grand foyer fell into a stunned silence. "That's impossible," Celeste whispered, her facade crumbling. "Oh, it's very possible," Sarah countered, her voice like ice. "Dr. Alistair Finch here has quite the reputation for assisting families in coercing elderly relatives into involuntary psychiatric commitments, typically for a rather substantial fee." Dr. Finch was already backing towards the exit, his composure shattered. "There's been some misunderstanding," he stammered. "The only misunderstanding," Sarah Jenkins stated, her voice devoid of warmth, "is the notion that you could execute such a deplorable scam within my client's residence." As the imposter doctor scurried away and the police officers began directing sharply worded questions at Celeste, Eleanor knew this was merely the prelude. The next morning, she sat in Sarah Jenkins' elegantly appointed office, sipping Earl Grey from delicate bone china cups, while Sarah meticulously arranged documents across her polished mahogany desk. After the police had meticulously taken statements and Dr. Finch had vanished into the night, Celeste and Liam had retreated to the guest suite, undoubtedly to concoct their next deceptive maneuver. "How long has this insidious plot been unfolding?" Sarah inquired, adjusting her sleek reading glasses. 8 months officially, Eleanor replied, taking a sip of tea. though I suspect Celeste began calculating the potential value of my home the very day she first met Liam. She always had an unsolicited opinion about how I could optimize my living space. Sarah nodded slowly. The fake psychiatric hold is a sophisticated scheme. Dr. Finch, whose actual name, incidentally, is Arthur Kellerman, has been orchestrating this operation across 3 different states. How exactly does it work? Eleanor asked, a chill running down her spine. A family member initiates a frantic call, claiming an elderly relative is suffering a complete breakdown. Kellerman arrives, impersonating their doctor, then convinces law enforcement the individual requires an emergency psychiatric commitment. Once the person is institutionalized, the family has a critical 72-hour window to initiate guardianship proceedings. The full, horrifying implications struck Eleanor like a sudden blast of icy air. They were trying to have me declared incompetent. Precisely, Sarah confirmed. Your daughter-in-law would become your legal guardian, granting her unfettered control over your entire estate, your financial assets, your beloved house, every medical decision, absolutely everything. Eleanor recalled Celeste's unnerving self-assurance the previous day, her perfectly timed tears, her elaborate fabrication about Eleanor's memory issues. This wasn't spontaneous. It was a meticulously planned ambush. Sarah pulled out another file. I conducted some preliminary research on Celeste Vance last night, a truly fascinating individual. Before she married your son, she was Celeste Parker, then Celeste Martinez, then Celeste Thompson. 3 marriages, 3 elderly spouses. Eleanor's breath hitched. Her first husband was 72, and he conveniently bequeathed her his condominium in Florida when he passed from a sudden heart attack. Her second husband was 68. He left her his entire investment portfolio after a rather convenient fall down the stairs. Her third husband was 75. He signed over all his assets to her mere weeks before he was discovered deceased in his swimming pool. Eleanor's hands were visibly shaking. And now she's married to my son, who is 42 and in robust health, Sarah finished. But his mother, Eleanor Vance, is 69, owns a fully paid-off home, and possesses a substantial retirement account. Bingo. Liam might not even be aware of Celeste's true agenda, Sarah mused. Some individuals are remarkably adept at manipulation. Eleanor stood and walked to Sarah's expansive window, gazing out at the bustling street below. Ordinary people going about their everyday lives, utterly unaware that predators like Celeste walked among them. What do we do now? First, we meticulously document every single thing, Sarah declared. I want you to install discrete security cameras throughout your house today. Record every conversation, every interaction. Second, we contact the other jurisdictions where Celeste operated. We will build an irrefutable pattern of her predatory behavior. Sarah offered a grim, determined smile. And third, we ensure Celeste Vance receives precisely what she truly deserves. That afternoon, Eleanor returned home to find Celeste in her kitchen, casually making herself a sandwich. Celeste looked up when Eleanor entered, her expression carefully neutral. How are you feeling today, Mom? Mom. The word felt alien, a performative affectation that had only recently entered Celeste's lexicon. I'm feeling quite well, thank you, Eleanor replied, her voice even, although I am curious about something. Oh, and what's that? Celeste asked, feigning profound concern, playing the role of the perfect daughter-in-law tending to her confused mother-in-law. I was just wondering about your previous marriages. Celeste's hand froze halfway to the mustard jar. My what? Your previous husbands. I met the most interesting police detective today. He had some fascinating stories about recent widow Celeste Parker, Celeste Martinez, and Celeste Thompson. The color drained from her face. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't. I opened my purse and pulled out the small recording device Sarah had given me. Just like you don't know, Dr. Finch's real name is Arthur Kellerman, and he's a convicted fraud. Celeste stared at the device like it was a snake. You can't record me without my permission. Actually, in a one-party consent state like ours, I can record any conversation I'm participating in, especially in my own house. She was backing toward the door now, her mask of manufactured concern completely gone. Liam, my son, appeared from the living room, remote control still in his hand. "What's wrong?" "Your mother is recording us. She's completely paranoid." Liam looked confused. "Mom, why are you recording Celeste?" "Because your wife has been married 3 times before you, and all 3 of her previous husbands are dead." The remote control clattered to the floor. Liam stood frozen in my living room, staring at Celeste like he'd never seen her before. "That's not true," he said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. "Show him the documents, Sarah," I said into my phone, which was connected to a conference call with my attorney. Sarah's voice came through the speaker clearly. "Liam, I'm emailing you the death certificates and marriage licenses right now. Your wife was married to Reginald Sterling in 2018. He died 6 months later, then to Victor Dubois in 2019. He died 8 months after the wedding, then to Alistair Croft in 2021, dead in 4 months. Celeste finally found her voice. "Those were coincidences. I can't help it if I attracted older men who had health problems." "Older men," I repeated. "Reginald Sterling was 72, Victor Dubois was 68, Alistair Croft was 75, and now you're married to my 42-year-old son. That's quite a pattern, Celeste." Liam was scrolling through his phone, reading the documents Sarah had sent. His face grew paler with each swipe. "Celeste," he said quietly, "you told me you'd only been married once before, to a man who died in a car accident. I didn't want you to think I was unlucky in love," she said, trying to recapture her sweet, vulnerable tone. "People judge widows, especially young widows." Young. Celeste was 39 years old and looked every day of it under her carefully applied makeup. "What about Dr. Finch?" Liam asked. "The man who was here yesterday claiming to be Mom's psychiatrist." Celeste's eyes darted between us. "I don't know anything about him. The police must have called him." Sarah's voice cut through the speaker. "Actually, Celeste, we have phone records showing 3 calls from your cell phone to Arthur Kellerman's number over the past 2 weeks. The longest call was 47 minutes. That's impossible. Would you like me to read you the exact times and durations?" Celeste was backing toward the staircase now. "Liam, you have to believe me. Your mother is trying to turn you against me." "Turn him against you," I laughed. "Celeste, you tried to have me committed to a psychiatric facility yesterday. You called a fake doctor to my house and told the police I was having a breakdown. I don't need to turn anyone against you. You're doing a fine job of that yourself." Liam was staring at his phone screen. "Celeste, this says Reginald Sterling changed his will 2 weeks before he died. He left everything to you instead of his children. He loved me. His children were horrible to him. And Victor Dubois signed over power of attorney to you the day before he fell down the stairs. He was getting forgetful. I was helping him manage his affairs. Alistair Croft transferred his bank accounts to your name 3 days before he drowned in his pool." Celeste's voice was getting high. Her voice grew shrill, desperate now. "These are all just unfortunate coincidences. You're making it sound like I murdered them." A heavy silence descended, thick with unspoken accusation. The raw admission hung in the air, a bell tolling a truth too dark for words. Liam slowly lowered his phone, his gaze fixed on Celeste. "Celeste, are you responsible for their deaths?" She recoiled, a frantic denial on her lips. "No, of course not. I cared for them. They were generous to me. Their passing was simply tragic." "And remarkably convenient," I interjected, my voice a quiet steel, "that each death occurred precisely after you'd secured complete control of their fortunes." Sarah's voice, calm and authoritative, cut through the rising tension from the phone speaker. "Celeste, I believe you should be aware that the police departments in Miami, Phoenix, and Portland have expressed considerable interest in revisiting those 3 cases, particularly now that they've uncovered your direct association with Arthur Kellerman." Celeste's eyes darted frantically, like a trapped bird beating against glass. But I'd witnessed her ruthlessness yesterday. I knew a cornered predator could be the most vicious. "You know what?" she declared, her voice abruptly, chillingly calm. "Fine. You want the absolute truth? Those old fools were pathetic, desperate for affection, practically begging to shower any woman with money who gave them the slightest bit of attention. They simply reaped what they sowed." Liam recoiled a step, a profound shock etching itself onto his features. "Celeste, what are you confessing to?" Liam stammered. "I'm saying your mother is absolutely right," Celeste replied, her voice devoid of remorse. "I sought out affluent, elderly men who met convenient ends, leaving me their fortunes. And yes, I was absolutely orchestrating the very same outcome for her." The casual admission detonated in the room, scattering all remaining pretense. "But here's what your precious mother still hasn't grasped," Celeste continued, her facade utterly shattered. "I no longer require Liam. I already siphoned half of her retirement fund into my private accounts last month." A visceral dread seized me. "What did you say?" Celeste offered a slow, predatory smile, the first genuine one I'd seen from her since yesterday. "It's truly remarkable what one can achieve with a signature, especially when you deliver someone's morning coffee every single day. A subtle addition to induce drowsiness, a few carefully placed documents to initial, and voila." The horrifying realization crashed over me. She'd been systematically intoxicating me. You've been drugging me," I gasped, the disparate fragments of my recent memories suddenly coalescing into a terrifying mosaic. The baffling exhaustion, the mornings I'd awoken with an inexplicable mental fog, the phantom documents I was certain I'd never seen, yet had apparently endorsed. Her smile remained, chillingly complacent. "Just a touch of something to aid your slumber, dear. You appeared so terribly burdened by our presence after all." Liam stumbled backward, his face a canvas of pure horror. "Celeste, you poisoned my mother." "Oh, don't play the innocent, Liam," she scoffed, her tone dripping with contempt. "You were perfectly content to squander the funds I transferred from her accounts, weren't you? That extravagant trip to Cancun, your latest high-tech gaming setup, all those pricey designer clothes I acquired for you. Pray tell, where did you honestly imagine all that money originated?" "I thought you had a job," Liam whispered, a desperate plea for normalcy. "I thought your boutique consulting gig actually paid something beyond minimum wage and the occasional tip." "Seriously, Liam?" Celeste sneered, her eyes glittering with malice. "You truly are even more tragically naive than your mother." Sarah's voice, now resonating with an undeniable authority, cut sharply through the phone's speaker. "Celeste, I must inform you that this entire exchange is being meticulously recorded. Furthermore, as of 10 minutes past the hour, the Federal Bureau of Investigation has successfully frozen all financial accounts linked to your Social Security number." Celeste's bravado visibly crumbled. "You can't possibly do that." "Actually, when an individual is under suspicion for serial elder fraud operating across multiple state lines," Sarah calmly countered, "the federal government possesses extensive capabilities. In fact, I anticipate Agent Harper Reed will be arriving at the residence momentarily." As if summoned by Sarah's words, the doorbell chimed. Through the ornate window beside the door, I could already discern a convoy of sleek, black SUVs quietly lining my street. You orchestrated this," Celeste hissed, her voice a barely audible tremor. "No," I corrected, drawing myself up with a newfound strength I hadn't felt in months. "I ensured my own protection. There's a crucial distinction." The arriving FBI agents moved with practiced precision and quiet efficiency. Agent Harper Reed, a woman who seemed roughly my age, with an intelligent gaze and a cascade of silver-streaked hair, formally took Celeste into custody, meticulously outlining her rights. The profound irony was not lost on me. Celeste was now being afforded the very legal protections she had so ruthlessly attempted to deny me. "Mrs. Vance," Agent Reed stated after Celeste had been escorted away, "will require you to visit the field office tomorrow to provide a comprehensive statement, but I want you to understand how remarkably courageous you were to expose this." "Courageous?" I mused, a dry chuckle escaping me. "I wasn't exactly coming forward, Agent. I was merely fighting to prevent them from driving me out of my own home." The agent, "Sometimes, Mrs. Vance, simply refusing to be a victim is the most profound act of courage." The agent's final words resonated. After the last sleek black SUV vanished down the street, Liam and I found ourselves in my living room, the quiet heavy between us. He seemed to have aged years in mere moments, his usual swagger replaced by a slumped vulnerability. The entitled son who'd stood idly by as Celeste spun her web of deceit had been replaced by a man utterly adrift, his world now turned inside out. "Mother," Liam finally uttered, his voice barely a whisper. I had no inkling. I truly swear I was completely unaware of what Celeste was truly plotting. I searched his eyes, seeking any flicker of deception, but found only raw, bewildered pain. "Yet you witnessed her blatant disrespect," I stated, my voice calm but firm. "You heard her attempt to evict me from my own home, and you remained silent." He lowered his head, a picture of profound misery. "You're right, Mom. I was a coward. After everything collapsed with my startup, the idea of someone choosing to be with me, of having a companion, felt so vital. I convinced myself it wasn't worth jeopardizing. Now," he choked out, "I see I chose a monstrous stranger over the son who should have protected his own mother. I let her get away with it all." His gaze met mine, brimming with unspilled tears. "Can you ever possibly forgive me, Mom?" I reached across and firmly clasped his hand. "Liam, you are my son, and I love you. But you must understand this. Respect is not a negotiable commodity, not in this house, and certainly not in my life." He nodded, shoulders slumped. "I understand. And Mom, I'm going to find my own place. You deserve to reclaim your sanctuary." I squeezed his hand, a silent promise. "One step at a time, dear. First, we will uncover every cent Celeste purloined and ensure its full recovery. Then we will ensure she never has the chance to prey on another family." What I left unsaid was that I already had a very clear plan for the recovered funds. Celeste Vance had foolishly believed she could exploit vulnerable elders without consequence. She was about to discover the profound error of that assumption. 3 weeks following Celeste's dramatic arrest, I sat in Agent Reed's modest office, a staggering figure on the bank statement making my head swim. "She pilfered approximately $347,000 from you over 8 months, Agent Reed stated, pushing the stack of documents across her functional metal desk. "But here's the intriguing part. She only managed to spend about $60,000 of it. We're still tracing the remainder. Celeste wasn't acting in isolation. Your situation, Mrs. Vance, was merely a single thread in a far more intricate tapestry." I leaned back, wincing in the standard issue, unyielding chair. "How much larger could it possibly be?" Agent Reed produced a substantial, heavily indexed file. "We've unearthed at least 15 additional victims spanning 6 states, all elderly, all ensnared by the same insidious methodology: fabricated psychiatric assessments, illicit guardianship petitions, counterfeit signatures." She paused, her gaze direct. 15 individuals who, unlike you, Mrs. Vance, lacked the foresight or the means to fight back effectively. Many now languish in state-run facilities, legally declared incompetent, their entire estates under the care of supposed family members who are, in reality, co-conspirators in this sprawling criminal enterprise. The sheer scale of the deception left me breathless. Celeste was working with a wider network, Agent Reed confirmed, including Arthur Kellerman, at least 3 other fraudulent medical professionals, several ethically compromised attorneys, and what we've termed a placement coordinator, the individual responsible for identifying potential targets. "A placement coordinator?" I echoed, the term chilling me. Agent Reed opened another folder. "Someone embedded within the healthcare or senior services sector who flags affluent, isolated, or particularly vulnerable elderly individuals, then transmits their sensitive data to the network." I pictured Celeste, so effortlessly sliding into my life through Liam. "How did they even find me?" Agent Reed exhaled slowly. "That's still under active investigation, Mrs. Vance. But here's the critical juncture. We require your assistance." "What kind of assistance?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. "The other victims are largely silenced. They've been legally incapacitated or terrorized into submission, or tragically, they've been gaslit into believing they genuinely are unwell. You are the sole survivor who not only saw through the charade, but actively resisted and won." What precisely do you propose? Agent Reed leaned forward, her expression intense. Help us dismantle the entire syndicate. There's a mastermind at the apex of this organization, someone we haven't yet identified, who's been pulling the strings for at least 5 years. My mind immediately conjured images of those 15 other innocents, confined to sterile institutions, their families perhaps assured they were receiving the finest care, while their entire legacies evaporated into illicit accounts. What would my role entail? I asked, a chill prickling my skin. Would I act as a decoy? Agent Reed's plan, I soon discovered, was disturbingly elegant in its simplicity. She began to explain. They laid out the strategy over strong coffee in my kitchen a few days later, Liam listening in grim silence. The Bureau would circulate whispers through specific channels that I had not only recovered my substantial stolen funds, but was now actively seeking secure, confidential avenues for investment. Their surveillance teams would meticulously monitor the communications of every unapprehended individual within Celeste's extensive network. The working theory, Agent Reed explained, was that someone, a placement coordinator, or perhaps a trusted associate, would inevitably attempt to connect with me. Someone seemingly innocuous, she elaborated, likely through a local acquaintance, a community event, or even your garden club. And that's when we truly begin to unravel this web. Liam shook his head, a line of worry etched between his brows. Mother, this sounds incredibly risky. What if something goes awry? I reached over and squeezed his hand, a small, wry smile touching my lips. Darling, awry happened when your wife tried to have me committed and pilfer my entire life's savings. At this juncture, a little calculated danger feels rather manageable. Agent Reed offered a reassuring nod. Mrs. Vance will have full, round-the-clock protection. We'll have a discreet perimeter established at all times, and she'll be equipped with advanced recording devices. Our intelligence suggests their initial approach will be subtle, patient. They were astute in that assessment. It took a little over a week. I was browsing the artisanal cheese selection at the local gourmet market on a Tuesday afternoon when a woman approached me. She was impeccably dressed, radiating an air of polished confidence, perhaps in her late 60s. Excuse me, she said, her voice smooth as silk. Aren't you Eleanor Vance? I'm Clara Jensen. I believe our families used to attend the same summer fair years ago. I didn't recognize her face, but I offered a polite, non-committal smile. It's a pleasure, Clara. She leaned in slightly, a conspiratorial glint in her eyes. I truly hate to interrupt your shopping, but I couldn't help but notice you discussing your recent financial windfall with the store manager earlier. He's quite a chatty fellow, isn't he? My internal alarms blared. I hadn't spoken a word about my finances to anyone. Oh yes, she continued, and it reminded me so much of my own situation after my dear husband, Richard, passed. I found the most discreet and trustworthy financial expert. He specializes in helping successful women protect their legacies from opportunistic relatives. The bait was perfectly cast, the hook almost invisible beneath a veneer of shared experience and false camaraderie. How incredibly thoughtful of you to share, I replied, my voice carefully modulated. Clara produced a tasteful, understated business card. His name is Mr. Elias Thorne. He truly has been a godsend for many of us ladies in similar sensitive positions, utterly discreet, supremely professional. After she'd glided away, I immediately sent a coded text to Agent Reed. Her response was instantaneous. Excellent. Elias Thorne is a known associate. We've been anticipating his introduction for some time. 2 days later, Elias Thorne called. His voice was a masterful instrument, warm, empathetic, tinged with a delicate concern that instantly disarmed. Mrs. Vance, Clara Jensen conveyed that you might be exploring some options for managing your recent recovery of assets. I understand you've had a rather challenging experience recently. Indeed, Mr. Thorne, I replied, settling into my kitchen chair, acutely aware of Agent Reed monitoring my every word from the surveillance van across the street. I am, shall we say, significantly more cautious these days. I've had a rather unpleasant encounter with someone attempting to exploit my finances. Oh, my dear, Elias Thorne sighed, his voice oozing with a practiced, profound sympathy. It's a deplorable reality. The epidemic of elder financial exploitation, particularly from those closest to us, is truly heartbreaking. He was exceptionally good, a true professional in his chosen field of deception. Would you be amenable to a confidential meeting, perhaps over coffee? My office in the Beacon Towers is quite comfortable, exceedingly private. I specialize in safeguarding the wealth of individuals from, shall we say, unwarranted intrusions. We scheduled our meeting for the following Tuesday. Agent Reed gave me a comprehensive briefing. Elias Thorne is a highly sophisticated operator, she warned, her expression grim. He's been active for at least 5 years. His standard procedure involves proposing a seemingly legitimate investment opportunity that necessitates signing over temporary power of attorney for expedited processing. Once that's secured, the target effectively vanishes into the system. A sudden, fabricated medical emergency, a swift psychiatric evaluation, followed by a convenient diagnosis of incapacitation. By the time genuine family members even realize what's transpired, their loved one's assets have been systematically stripped, and they're likely confined to an isolated, restrictive facility. Agent Reed's voice echoed in my mind. We believe he's entrapped at least 20 individuals this way, Mrs. Vance. This meeting is our opportunity to get his entire scheme on record. Elias Thorne's executive suite in the Beacon Towers was a masterclass in understated affluence. Dark wood, supple leather, a panoramic city view, and a wall adorned with tastefully framed, generic accolades rather than specific diplomas. A few artfully curated abstract sculptures rested on polished surfaces, alongside a single discreet silver frame holding a black and white photo of a serene elderly woman. Mrs. Vance, a true pleasure, he greeted, rising from behind his expansive desk. He was exactly as I'd pictured from Agent Reed's dossier, roughly 55, with an impeccable silver coiffure and eyes that crinkled with practiced warmth behind his elegant spectacles. The kind of man whose sincerity felt almost tangible. Clara Jensen spoke so highly of you, a real testament to your resilience after such a trying time. Please, make yourself comfortable. I settled into the deep plush armchair. Clara seems delightful. She is, Thorne affirmed, a gentle smile playing on his lips, and one of my most gratifying success stories. When her own stepchildren were making unsettling attempts to question her mental capacity, I was able to secure her entire legacy. Now, her considerable assets are completely impervious to their unfortunate aspirations. How did you manage that? I inquired, feigning profound interest. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper, yet perfectly clear, for the hidden recorder. Eleanor, if I may call you Eleanor. There are highly specialized legal frameworks, entirely legitimate, that are simply unknown to the general public. They go far beyond basic trusts or wills. For instance, we employ a process where we can temporarily safeguard your assets within a legacy protection trust, a secure temporary holding account, while we formalize what's called a senior guardian shield. It's entirely ironclad, provided it's executed with absolute precision. Temporarily transfer my assets? I echoed, maintaining my innocent facade. Just while the paperwork is finalized? Precisely. Typically a fortnight at most, he confirmed, his gaze unwavering. During that brief period, your entire net worth is absolutely insulated from any opportunistic individuals, particularly family members who might, shall we say, misinterpret your desire for financial autonomy as cognitive vulnerability. He paused, letting the implication hang. I imagine you know precisely what I mean, given your recent difficulties. It sounds rather intricate, I mused, tapping a finger on my chin. Thorne chuckled softly. Intricate for a novice, perhaps, but for my firm, it's a seamless, almost invisible process. You simply provide a few authorized signatures granting me temporary signatory power, and my team handles every single detail. Clara underwent this identical, flawless procedure. And where exactly do these assets reside during this temporary phase? I pressed, trying to sound a touch more insistent. His smile remained unblemished. Within a rigorously audited, completely secure fiduciary account, Eleanor, managed directly by my firm. Fully insured, entirely impenetrable. You'll receive meticulous, real-time statements detailing every single transaction, every penny accounted for. And should, I began, letting a hint of concern enter my voice, something unforeseen occurred to me during those 2 weeks. A sudden medical emergency, perhaps? His eyes twinkled. Ah, Eleanor, that is truly the cornerstone of its ingenuity. If for any reason you become temporarily incapacitated, the Legacy Protection Trust maintains its impenetrable hold. Your family cannot access a single cent. Predatory relatives are entirely thwarted from attempting to coerce or manipulate you into ill-advised decisions. It is quite simply impregnable. Impregnable indeed, I murmured, a dry note in my tone. Mr. Thorne, I must admit this almost sounds too ideal. How can I be certain this isn't some elaborate contrivance? His expression shifted, a subtle, wounded surprise. Eleanor, I genuinely understand your reservations. After the harrowing ordeal you've just endured, it would be unnatural for you not to be wary. But I have dedicated over a decade to fortifying the financial security of discerning seniors. My practice is built on trust. I can provide extensive verifiable references, glowing testimonials, anything at all to assuage your concerns. I'd need time to consider everything, of course, I stated. He leaned forward again, the conspiratorial warmth replaced by a shadow of grave concern. Eleanor, I truly must impress upon you. Based on Clara's account of your recent family challenges, time is no longer a luxury you possess. If your son and his wife are already contemplating legal avenues to question your competency, every day we delay provides them with a more substantial platform to dismantle your autonomy. How quickly could such a process be initiated, should I decide to proceed? I asked, playing directly into his hand. Remarkably swiftly, he declared, his confidence resurging. I could have all the necessary documentation prepared for your signature by tomorrow morning. The entire process, from initial transfer to the senior guardian shield being fully active, could realistically be finalized by Friday. 4 days. 4 days to become a financial ghost, stripped of my identity and my life's work. The thought was chilling. I'll contact you tomorrow with my decision, I said, rising from the armchair. As I extended my hand, he clasped it firmly, his smile radiating practiced empathy. Eleanor, your caution is precisely why you're a survivor. It demonstrates an astute intelligence, the very characteristic that makes you deserving of absolute financial protection. Walking to my car, the cold dread returned, even stronger now. He was so polished, so flawlessly convincing, a predator in a bespoke suit, weaving a web of false security with every mellifluous word, so perfectly composed, so utterly predatory, precisely crafted to capitalize on the profound anxieties of vulnerable seniors, many of whom had already endured prior exploitation. Yet, a more potent emotion stirred within me, righteous indignation. Agent Reed, accompanied by 2 unfamiliar federal agents, awaited my return in the kitchen, a quiet tension in the air. The discreet recording devices had flawlessly captured every nuanced syllable of my exchange with Elias Thorne. Outstanding work, Mrs. Vance, Agent Reed affirmed, her eyes meeting mine with approval as she accessed the audio files on her tablet. She then meticulously dissected the mechanics of the entire fraudulent scheme. How many others has he ensnared with this elaborate deception? I inquired, deliberately steadying my hand as I poured freshly brewed coffee for them all. Based on our comprehensive analysis, including critical information from Celeste's seized records, Agent Reed elaborated, Elias Thorne functions as a central architect in this sprawling operation. He identifies high-value targets, cultivates their trust, then systematically manipulates them into signing away power of attorney before funneling them into the network's compromised medical and legal teams for institutionalization. The younger agent, his face betraying a youthful earnestness, leaned forward. Mrs. Vance, we estimate Thorne has been operating at this sophisticated level for a minimum of 5 years. All illicit proceeds from his victims are meticulously laundered through his seemingly legitimate investment firm, ultimately routed to untraceable accounts nestled in the Cayman Islands. What kind of sums are we looking at? I pressed, my voice barely a whisper. A conservative estimate, Agent Reed replied grimly, places the stolen capital at no less than $12 million. My coffee cup clattered against the saucer, the sound sharp in the quiet room. $12 million, at a minimum, pilfered from unsuspecting elders. And that, you say, only accounts for the cases already on your radar? Agent Reed produced another heavily tabbed file. Mrs. Vance, we are prepared to proceed with the next phase of the operation, but it's imperative you fully grasp the inherent risks involved. Should Thorne detect even the faintest suspicion, or if our movements are premature, he possesses the means to vanish without a trace. We may lose our best opportunity to apprehend him. What exactly do you require of me? I asked, my resolve hardening. You must contact him tomorrow, Agent Reed instructed, her gaze steady, and unequivocally agree to his proposed Legacy Protection Trust and Senior Guardian Shield plan. Our teams will have his office entirely surveilled, both audibly and visually. The moment he presents the power of attorney documents for your signature, we will possess irrefutable evidence for his immediate arrest. And the countless individuals he's already victimized? I pressed, a cold knot forming in my stomach. The ones currently languishing in those dreadful facilities? Once Thorne is in custody and we gain access to his comprehensive records, Agent Reed explained, a hint of weariness in her voice, we can finally begin the arduous process of securing their release and initiating the recovery of their stolen funds. It will be a protracted endeavor, Mrs. Vance. Some have been ensnared within that system for years, their lives effectively erased. Sleep eluded me that night, a relentless parade of thoughts haunting my mind. I couldn't shake the image of Clara Jensen, who had approached me so smoothly in the gourmet market. Was she merely a prior victim, now coerced into recruitment, or an integral, willing component of this ruthless syndicate from its inception? My mind drifted to the 15 or more other individuals Agent Reed had mentioned. Elderly souls confined to sterile institutions, undoubtedly fed a cruel diet of lies by staff. Your families no longer wish to see you. You are simply too unwell to manage your own lives. 15 lives extinguished, their life savings systematically plundered, their minds slowly clouded by covertly administered sedatives, reducing them to compliant shadows of their former selves. Around 3 a.m, I rose, a fierce clarity settling over me, and meticulously compiled a list of incisive questions I intended to pose to Elias Thorne. If I was going to participate in dismantling this nefarious enterprise, I resolved to execute my role with absolute precision and unwavering resolve. The following day, I dialed Thorne's elegant office. "Eleanor," he greeted, his voice resonating with that practiced warmth. "I was genuinely hoping to hear from you. Have you reached a decision regarding the Legacy Protection Trust?" "I have," I affirmed, allowing a touch of cautious optimism to color my tone. "I'd like to proceed." "Wonderful. That is truly splendid news," he enthused. "Can you possibly join me this afternoon? I've already anticipated your sagacity and prepared all the requisite documentation." "Actually, Elias," I interjected, a slight hesitation in my voice, "I was wondering if we might convene somewhere a touch more intimate. Your office, while magnificent, felt a trifle formal yesterday. Is there perhaps a quieter, more relaxed venue we could consider?" A brief, almost imperceptible pause ensued. "And where precisely did you have in mind, Eleanor?" he inquired, his tone carefully neutral. "My home, perhaps," I suggested, making sure my voice carried a hint of vulnerability. "I find I'm much more at ease reviewing sensitive financial documents within the familiar comfort of my own residence." This time, the silence stretched, a fraction longer, before he finally responded. "I suppose that would be entirely acceptable, Mrs. Vance. Would 3 o'clock this afternoon suit your schedule?" "Perfect," I confirmed. The moment I disconnected, I immediately contacted Agent Reed. "He's coming to my house this afternoon," I reported, a thrill of anticipation mixed with dread coursing through me. "Even better," Agent Reed declared, a steely satisfaction in her voice. "We can meticulously wire your entire residence for both audio and video surveillance. Mrs. Vance, by the close of today, we anticipate having sufficient evidence to dismantle this entire insidious network. At 2:45 that afternoon, precisely 15 minutes before the appointed time, I sat in my living room, my gaze fixed on the street through the sheer lace curtains. Elias Thorne's polished black sedan glided into my driveway. He emerged, a sleek leather briefcase in hand, radiating an aura of impeccable professionalism, precisely the image of a profoundly trustworthy and discreet financial advisor. I greeted him with a meticulously crafted smile, a blend of vulnerability and relief. "Mr. Thorne, thank you so much for agreeing to meet here. It truly does feel more comfortable discussing such sensitive matters in my own home." "Of course, Eleanor," he replied, his voice a balm. "My utmost priority is ensuring you feel entirely at ease throughout this process." As I led him into my living room, I couldn't help but wonder how many other unsuspecting individuals had heard those very words, uttered with such practiced sincerity just moments before surrendering their autonomy. But today, the narrative would be dramatically different. Today, Elias Thorne was about to taste a bitter dose of his own medicine. With the smooth efficiency of a seasoned maestro, Elias Thorne laid out the assortment of papers across my polished antique coffee table. There were documents for power of attorney, forms for asset transfer, and intricately worded medical directives, every single instrument meticulously designed to seize control of a life. "Now, Eleanor, I want to ensure you understand the precise function of each of these crucial documents," he began, his voice warm and reassuring. "This first one, for instance, grants me temporary authority to facilitate the movement of your assets into the protective holding account." I picked up the power of attorney document, feigning a studious gaze. "Mr. Thorne, this wording," I began, tracing a finger across the page, "it seems incredibly expansive. It grants you authority over all my financial and medical decisions, albeit temporarily and only for my protection. It states that once this asset shield is established, the power of attorney will become inactive. When, precisely, does that inactivation occur?" He paused, a barely perceptible flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Once I, in my professional assessment, determine that your assets are entirely insulated from any potential threats." "I see," I mused, placing the document back down. "And who, precisely, makes that determination?" "Why, I do, of course," he affirmed, his practiced smile never wavering. "Based on a comprehensive evaluation of your unique circumstances." I leaned back, a dry chuckle escaping me. "So, to distill it, you essentially decide when to grant me back access to my own funds." Thorne's smile flickered, a momentary fissure in his carefully constructed facade. "Eleanor, I genuinely understand your concern, but you simply must trust the proven efficacy of our process. This is precisely how we protected Clara Jensen's assets, for example." "Speaking of Clara," I interjected, a casual note in my voice, "I'd truly appreciate the opportunity to speak with her directly about her experience. Could you perhaps provide her contact information?" His composure, for the first time, seemed to waver slightly. "I'm afraid, Eleanor, client confidentiality is paramount. I simply cannot disclose such personal details." "Of course, I understand the principle," I replied smoothly. "But surely Clara wouldn't object to me calling her, especially since she was the one who so kindly recommended your services." Thorne's gaze darted around the room, a clear sign of unease. "Perhaps we could arrange for her to contact you after we've completed the requisite documentation." "Why not before?" I pressed gently. He started to formulate a reply, then visibly stumbled, the implications of his own evasion dawning on him. "Eleanor, I sense some hesitation on your part," he pivoted, attempting to regain control. "Is there something specific that's causing you distress?" I leaned back further in my armchair, my gaze dissecting him. This man who had built his despicable fortune by dismantling the lives of trusting elders. This predator who had perfected the insidious art of appearing trustworthy while meticulously plotting betrayal. "Elias," I continued, a slight edge now sharpening my tone, "I'm rather curious about something. How did Clara Jensen know I was supposedly discussing my finances with the grocery store manager?" His perfectly composed expression faltered, a momentary blankness crossing his features. I I beg your pardon? When she approached me at the gourmet market, I explained, she claimed she'd overheard me discussing my recent financial recovery with the manager. But, I paused, letting my gaze hold his. I never had that conversation. Perhaps you're presuming I've forgotten, Mr. Thorne? I'm 69 years old, not 99. My memory, I assure you, is perfectly intact. So I repeat, how did Clara know to approach me? The friendly mask had now completely slipped, revealing the calculating glint beneath. Eleanor, I think you're overthinking this, he stammered, attempting a dismissive wave of his hand. Am I? I retorted, my voice unwavering. Because I'm also curious about something else. While we're on the subject of transparency, you mentioned earlier, and indeed on your website, that you've dedicated over a decade to fortifying the financial security of discerning seniors. Yet, my attorney, Ms. Jenkins, informs me your firm's business license was only officially filed 3 years ago. That's a rather significant discrepancy, wouldn't you agree? Elias Thorne, his face now a mask of barely controlled agitation, began to hastily gather the scattered documents. Eleanor, I genuinely believe this isn't the opportune moment for you to be making such weighty financial decisions. On the contrary, Mr. Thorne, I countered, a triumphant gleam in my eye. I think this is the perfect time. I rose fluidly from my armchair and walked to the window, pulling aside the sheer lace curtains. Elias, I said, my voice resonating with an unshakable finality. Do you happen to notice that unassuming black SUV parked directly across the street? He turned, his gaze following mine, and I watched the color drain from his face as the realization hit him. That, Mr. Thorne, I continued, is Agent Harper Reed, and I assure you she, along with her entire team, has been privy to every single word of our enlightening discussion. Thorne sprang to his feet, frantically shoving papers back into his elegant briefcase, his earlier composure utterly annihilated. This is entrapment, he spat, his voice laced with desperate fury. Entrapment? I laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of mirth. No, Elias. Entrapment, Elias, is what you inflict upon vulnerable elders. This, however, is simply justice. He was scrambling toward the door, his polished demeanor utterly shattered, when it abruptly swung inward. Agent Reed stepped through, flanked by 2 other federal agents, their presence exuding quiet authority. Elias Thorne, Agent Reed declared, her voice crisp and commanding, you are under arrest for elder fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit aggravated kidnapping. As they meticulously read him his rights and secured his wrists in cold steel, Thorne cast a look over his shoulder, his eyes burning with a venomous hatred. You have no idea what you've done, he spat, his voice a low growl. This is far more extensive than you can possibly comprehend. Agent Reed closed the door behind the receding figures, then turned back to me, a quiet smile gracing her lips. Mrs. Vance, she affirmed, we truly couldn't have achieved this without you. Now, what happens next? I inquired, my voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through me. Now, we systematically utilize the invaluable intelligence gleaned from Thorne's records to meticulously locate all his victims and initiate the complex process of securing their release. Concurrently, we will relentlessly follow the intricate money trail to ascertain precisely how high this criminal enterprise truly extends. Barely 2 hours later, Agent Reed's voice on the phone pierced the calm of my kitchen, delivering news that sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. Mrs. Vance, we've been meticulously poring over Thorne's digital archives. This operation, it's not merely regional as we initially suspected. It's a national syndicate. And the individual at the absolute pinnacle. She paused, her breath catching slightly. You are absolutely not going to believe who it is. My grip tightened on the receiver. Who? I demanded, a knot forming in my stomach. Thorne has been reporting to someone codenamed the Coordinator. Based on the intricate communication patterns and the convoluted financial flows we've unraveled, we now believe the Coordinator has been masterminding analogous operations in at least 15 distinct states across the country. My mind reeled. How much money are we talking about? Agent Reed's voice hardened. We're estimating over $50 million, Mrs. Vance. pilfered from unsuspecting elderly victims over the past 8 years. I sank heavily into my kitchen chair, the sum echoing in the sudden silence. $50 million. My disbelief was palpable. Mrs. Vance, you didn't merely aid us in apprehending a sophisticated scammer. You, Eleanor Vance, have been instrumental in uncovering what is poised to become recognized as potentially the largest elder fraud operation in the history of the United States. But the true, most profound shock was still awaiting its dramatic reveal. Agent Reed arrived at my home the very next morning, bringing with her revelations that fundamentally altered every preconceived notion I held about this entire insidious case. Mrs. Vance, we have definitively identified the coordinator, she announced, her voice grave, as she carefully placed a slender file onto my polished kitchen table. And for this particular piece of information, you are absolutely going to want to be seated. I poured us both coffee, my hands trembling slightly, then settled back into my chair, my gaze fixed intently on her. Who is it? She slowly opened the file, then extracted a professional headshot, a photograph of a woman in her early 50s, her silver-streaked hair styled with impeccable precision, her eyes radiating a deceptive aura of warmth and kindness. I stared at the image, a profound confusion washing over me. I don't understand. Who is this woman? Dr. Helena Sterling, Agent Reed supplied, her voice grim. She has been orchestrating this entire sprawling operation from a seemingly legitimate senior care consulting firm based in Chicago. A sudden recognition, chilling and unwelcome, pricked at my memory. Sterling? As in Arthur Kellerman, the fraudulent psychiatrist who impersonated Dr. Finch? Her brother, Agent Reed confirmed, a flicker of dark irony in her eyes. But here is the truly staggering part that will undoubtedly shock you to your core. Dr. Helena Sterling is a real doctor. She is a fully licensed geriatrician who has been ruthlessly exploiting her trusted position within the medical community to meticulously identify and target her victims. I found myself studying the photograph with renewed scrutiny. Something about the woman's face tugged at the edges of my consciousness, a vague familiarity I couldn't quite pinpoint. She systematically uses her legitimate medical practice to identify elderly patients who are both affluent and isolated. Agent Reed continued, her explanation painting a chilling picture of calculated betrayal. Then, she covertly refers them to her network of what she euphemistically terms specialized elder care coordinators, individuals precisely like Elias Thorne. And her unsuspecting patients implicitly trust her, because, as you now know, she is a real doctor. Exactly, Agent Reed affirmed, her voice heavy with the weight of the deception. Over the past 8 years, she has meticulously constructed an expansive network comprised of deceitful financial advisors, corrupt attorneys, and fraudulent medical professionals, all operating across at least 15 different states. They have collectively plundered in excess of $50 million, and far more horrifyingly, have forcibly institutionalized more than 200 elderly individuals in secured facilities against their will. The sheer, monumental scope of the operation left me utterly speechless, a sickening sensation twisting in my gut. 200 people, I whispered, the number almost incomprehensible. We commenced making arrests nationwide yesterday, Agent Reed stated, her voice returning to a more official tone. We have successfully recovered 37 victims thus far, and our teams are working tirelessly around the clock to locate and liberate the remainder. Agent Reed then produced another document from her file. Mrs. Vance, there is something else that you need to know. We discovered your name within Dr. Sterling's meticulously maintained files. My blood ran cold, a sudden icy fear gripping me. What do you mean? You were identified as a target approximately 18 months ago, Mrs. Vance, she explained, her gaze empathetic, long before Celeste ever entered your life. She handed me a neatly arranged folder, clearly labeled with my name. Inside, I found copies of my personal medical records, detailed financial statements, property records, and even subtly candid photographs of my house. How in the world did she obtain all of this? I demanded, a surge of violations sweeping through me. We are still actively investigating that particular avenue, Agent Reed replied, her jaw tightening. But our preliminary findings strongly suggest that someone within your own medical provider's office was systematically feeding sensitive information to Dr. Sterling's network. My mind flashed back to my routine annual physical 18 months ago, my annual checkup, the routine blood work and screening tests. Had a data breach, or worse, a willing accomplice in my own doctor's office, been systematically passing my private information to these criminals? Mrs. Vance, Celeste didn't just stumble upon your family by chance, Agent Reed clarified, her voice firm. She was precisely directed to your son, Liam, specifically because Dr. Sterling's extensive research identified you as an ideal target. An ideal target? I echoed, the phrase tasting like ash. Agent Reed flipped open a digital file on her tablet. Affluent widow, a fully paid-off home, substantial retirement account, adult son whose financial struggles made him susceptible, no other immediate family nearby to raise alarms, in excellent health but undeniably aging. You checked every single box on their predatory victim profile. The horrifying realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Liam hadn't met Celeste at some random tech event. She had deliberately sought him out, a calculated insertion into my life. We're certain of it, Agent Reed confirmed, seeing the dawning horror in my eyes. Celeste's previous marriages, as Sarah had uncovered, followed an identical, chilling pattern. She would meticulously research affluent elderly individuals, then strategically target their financially vulnerable adult children or grandchildren to gain an uncontested entree into their lives. My mind raced back to Liam's whirlwind romance with Celeste, how rapidly they'd cohabited, how excessively eager she'd been to meet me, to charmingly integrate herself into my home. I, in my naive generosity, had dismissed it as the fervent rush of young love. Now I understood it was calculated predation from the very first moment. There's more, Agent Reed continued, her tone softening slightly. Dr. Helena Sterling, the coordinator, has been arrested in Chicago. When our teams raided her ostensibly legitimate senior care consulting firm, we uncovered detailed plans for your case. You were slated for a secured long-term facility deep in the secluded foothills of Colorado. There, you would have been kept heavily sedated and almost entirely isolated while they systematically drained your accounts dry. For how long? I managed, my voice barely a whisper. Until you either passed away or until the money ran out, Agent Reed replied, her gaze unwavering. The casual, almost clinical brutality of it stole my breath. And Liam, I choked out. What would they have told Liam? That you were receiving the absolute best possible care for your advanced cognitive decline, she explained, and that visits were strongly discouraged as they tended to agitate your condition. I stood and walked to my living room window, looking out at the tree-lined street where I'd made my home for 41 years, the neighborhood where I'd raised Liam, where I'd buried George, where I had always envisioned growing old peacefully, surrounded by my memories. Mrs. Vance, Agent Reed said, her voice cutting through my anguish, I need you to understand something crucial. Your actions didn't just save your own life. Because of your courage and unwavering tenacity, we've been able to rescue nearly 200 other victims from identical fates, and we've successfully dismantled potentially the largest elder fraud operation in the history of the United States. I turned back to Agent Reed, my resolve hardening. What happens to the money they stole? We are meticulously working to return every possible cent to the victims, she assured me. In your case, we've recovered all of your funds, plus applicable interest. And for the individuals who were forcibly institutionalized, we are working closely with state authorities across the country to secure their release and facilitate their reunion with their genuine families. It will be a protracted, arduous process for many, but we will get them home. That afternoon, I sat in my garden, a cup of chamomile tea steaming gently in my hand, reflecting on the tumultuous 9 months that had transformed my life. 9 months ago, I had been a grieving widow, perhaps too kind for my own good, letting her son and his manipulative wife exploit her generosity. Today, I was a woman who had, against all odds, helped to bring down a sprawling criminal empire. My phone rang, pulling me from my reverie. It was Liam. Mom, he began, his voice laced with awe. I just saw the news. Dr. Sterling's arrest is all over national television. I know, dear, I replied, a faint smile touching my lips. They're saying you helped the FBI catch the whole network. I did what needed to be done, I stated simply. There was a long, emotional pause. Mom, I'm so incredibly proud of you, Liam finally said, his voice thick with emotion. And I'm so profoundly sorry for everything Celeste put you through, for everything I let her put you through. Liam, you were a victim too, I gently corrected him. Celeste manipulated you, just as she tried to manipulate me. But you fought back. You ultimately refused to be a victim. I smiled, watching a vibrant cardinal land on my bird feeder, its plumage a defiant splash of color against the green. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do to a predator, my dear, is simply refuse to be prey. Nearly a year later, I received an official commendation from the Department of Justice, a formal letter thanking me for my invaluable service in dismantling the Sterling network. The operation had ultimately rescued 195 elderly victims and successfully recovered nearly $48 million in stolen assets. But the true, most profound reward came a few weeks after that, when a woman named Agnes Sinclair called to thank me. She'd been one of Dr. Sterling's victims, trapped in a sterile facility in the foothills of Colorado for over 17 months, while her entire estate was systematically drained. Mrs. Vance, she said, her voice strong and clear, infused with an almost sacred gratitude. Because of what you did, I'm back in my own home, with my own family. You gave me my life back. That evening, sitting in my living room, the very room where Celeste had once so casually tried to convince authorities I was experiencing a mental break, I grasped a profound truth. I was no longer the Eleanor Vance who had passively tolerated being taken advantage of. The quiet widow who had once let politeness muzzle her own defense was gone. I was Eleanor Vance, 69 years vibrant and an unwavering advocate for justice. This narrative, my voice, is dedicated to every soul who found strength in their own story. Thank you for being a part of it. Share your reflections below because your voice truly illuminates the path for others.